What if Luffy had Gear 5th in episode 1? Just imagine we're in episode 1 of One Piece, that classic moment where we see Luffy inside a barrel, ready to become the freest man in the world. But instead of being the inexperienced little pirate who ends up getting caught by Alvida, he shows up with Gear 5th. Yes, the monstrous power he wouldn't normally unlock until Wano. What would happen, my friend, would be sheer chaos of unimaginable proportions. Now, come along on this epic and hilarious journey to see what this alternate world would look like if Luffy started off with Gear 5 from the very beginning. Picture the scene. Luffy pops out of that barrel and immediately heads into a fight with Alvida. Alvida, the pirate who, at first, was one of the most mediocre villains in the One Piece universe. Let's be honest, the only interesting thing about Alvida was her super smash stuff with a giant axe power. And Luffy, well, Luffy didn't care that she was a weak pirate, but here's the twist. With Gear 5th from the start, Luffy could instantly turn his body into this surreal, indestructible rubber. He'd grin, and just by stretching out his hand, he'd bend Alvida's axe like it was clay. Alvida would be more shocked than when she realized the mermaid story was a lie. And suddenly, Luffy wouldn't even need that whole dramatic, "I'm strong and I'll fight you" moment. He'd just laugh, "Ha ha! Is that all?" and land a punch so powerful it'd turn Alvida into flying modeling clay. Game over! Luffy defeats Alvida effortlessly, not even breaking a sweat. He wouldn't even need the iconic line, "I'm going to be king of the pirates," because Gear 5th's power would speak for itself. Result? Luffy comes out unscathed, defeating one of the first villains instantly. The story would move so much faster. Recruiting his crew wouldn't have the tension of, "I need to train and get stronger." Instead, he'd just look at Nami and Zoro and say, "Let's go, crew. Adventure awaits." And that's it. No drama. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but what about Zoro? Can he survive this power bomb? Well, not exactly. Poor Zoro would just be a spectator at the Luffy Absolute Power Show. The samurai, legendary with his swords, would start the fight in his usual stylish way, but you know that climactic moment where Zoro starts showing off his strength, swords clashing, smoke flying? In the Gear 5th universe, that's just a snack for Luffy. Luffy could mess up Zoro's hair with a single rubber jump or spin him around until he's dizzy. The fight would turn into a scene of Master Luffy playing with rookie Zoro. Except instead of showing Zoro's skills, it's Luffy showing how he can turn his body into a springy, elastic mass. By the end, Zoro, convinced Luffy was joking, would at least be completely flustered. You are the king of the pirates? Zoro would ask, confused, and Luffy, acting like it's the simplest thing in the world, would say, "Yep, and you, Zoro, are on my team now." Result: Zoro would join much more directly, without all the drama of "I need to prove I'm stronger." Luffy would have absurd confidence and start his journey with a strong crew right from the start. Faster still, he'd have Zoro and Nami ready to tackle the next adventure immediately. Now, one thing's for sure, when Luffy first met Nami, their relationship was built through misunderstandings, betrayals, and earning trust over time. But if he were already the king of the pirates, it would be different. Picture Nami trying to steal Luffy's ship to save her village, and Luffy showing up with that smile like he already knows what's going to happen. With Gear 5th at his disposal, he wouldn't need an epic fight or even trick Nami into helping him. Luffy would just leap, stretch his body, and trap Nami's ship, leaving her no way out. Oh, you wanted to run away, Nami? Come on, I'm Luffy, future king of the pirates. Let's save this village. You're about to see what real adventure looks like. And just like that, Nami, initially planning to steal the ship and run, would be blown away by Luffy's insane strength, and of course join him way faster than usual, just to make sure he doesn't cause more trouble. Result: Luffy and Nami's relationship would be more straightforward, without the "I need to trust you" drama. Nami would still be a master thief, but it would be much easier for her to accept joining Luffy, because, let's face it, who's going to stop a guy who's already the king of the pirates with Gear 5th from the start? If Luffy had Gear 5th from the get-go, the big question would be, what's the challenge? Sure, he'd face strong villains like Buggy, but ultimately, he wouldn't struggle to defeat them. Luffy's real challenge was never just physical strength. It was learning to be a leader, win people over, and above all, understand what it really takes to become the king of the pirates. However, starting at peak power, his journey might be more about exploring islands and understanding the world without as many self-discovery moments. He wouldn't have to work so hard to trust his friends or find new goals, because Gear 5th lets him manipulate the world around him. He could even play with his enemies, turning them into rubber puppets. Imagine him turning an entire ship into a rubber toy. But the true test would be, how do you maintain freedom when nobody can actually defeat you? Result: Luffy might face the dilemma of handling the responsibility of being that strong, creating a deeper reflection on what it really means to be free. But in the end, it'd just give him more opportunity to keep traveling and having fun, with the confidence that absolutely no one could stop him. One could. The Buggy arc. In the anime, it's one of those storylines that blends the comical with the epic. Luffy, with his uncontrollable energy and his ability to make even people who dislike pirates smile, gets tangled up with a clown pirate who deep down isn't as threatening as he seems. But what if from the very start of his journey, Luffy was already the king of the pirates with Gear 5th? I'm talking about a version of Luffy who could defeat Buggy without even moving. No sweat. And of course, without that emotional buildup of, well, Luffy doesn't have what it takes yet, but he'll learn along the journey because he already has everything. Now, let's take a look at this insane scenario of what the Buggy arc would be like with a super-powered Luffy, cape on, Gear 5th, ready to crush everything. Luffy, our charismatic hero, parachutes onto Buggy's island, where he and his gang are causing chaos, stealing, and terrifying civilians. In the original world, Luffy's fight against Buggy and his crew is fun, with that chaotic battle vibe, where Luffy learns to use his abilities strategically. But with Gear 5th activated, things change drastically. Right from the start, Buggy introduces himself in his over-the-top way, flaunting his power to control his separated body parts. You know, the Bara Bara no Mi, the Chop Chop fruit. Buggy starts playing around with Luffy, thinking he can intimidate him, but my friend Luffy with Gear 5th isn't someone a clown like Buggy can scare. Luffy's power now literally warps reality around him with a simple thought. We're not just talking about elasticity, we're talking about turning space itself into something flexible. So when Buggy tries to attack Luffy with his separated body parts, Luffy just stretches to dodge every hit and slaps Buggy's face with the force of a rubber hurricane. Buggy wouldn't even have time to laugh before being sent flying like a sack of garbage. Result? A fight that originally takes a few minutes to unfold, with Luffy figuring out how Buggy works and falling for his traps, would be over in less than 30 seconds. Puff, Buggy's done. He wouldn't even have time to say his famous "I'm the most feared pirate" line before getting crushed by a punch from Luffy in crazy rubber form. KO instant. Now, Nami enters the scene. She's there to trick Luffy, steal the treasure map, and run off with her share of the money. In the original anime, the Buggy arc shows Nami manipulating Luffy and Zoro, using her charm to get them to do her dirty work. But with an invincible Luffy, everything changes completely. Nami shows up, tries to trick Luffy, thinking she can exploit his innocence like she's done with others before. She says something like, "I'm going to steal this ship and run with or without your help." But Luffy, wearing that knowing smile, simply says, "You're not going anywhere, Nami. There's nowhere left to run. Now, let's take down Buggy and finish this once and for all." This time, there are no sneaky plans or tricks. Luffy doesn't need anyone's help to defeat Buggy, and he knows exactly how to move forward without wasting time on drama. What follows is a slightly awkward exchange of glances, because Nami realizes that with this Luffy, she doesn't have much chance to manipulate him. He's no longer the simple pirate who can be easily fooled. It's time to join forces. Result? The Buggy arc, which originally involved Nami infiltrating Luffy's crew and pulling off small betrayals, is reduced to a simple moment of alliance. Nami doesn't have to work hard to join the crew. She joins because Luffy is simply impossible to trick and doesn't mind letting someone with their own agenda come along, as long as it helps the ultimate goal, finding the greatest treasure in the world. Nami is still there, keeping a bit of her scheming charm, but now it's fast-tracked into genuine friendship with Luffy. If you think about it, the Buggy arc serves as an introduction not just to Luffy, but also to the idea of pirates with their own goals. Buggy and his crew were meant to challenge Luffy, but with Luffy having Gear 5th, he wouldn't need any obstacles to get through this arc. Buggy, with all his crazy charisma, might even try one last attack, but honestly, he'd mostly serve to show just how absurdly powerful Luffy has become. The real question here is, how does this affect Luffy's journey? Without a big challenge at the start, his first major goal would be achieved super quickly. He'd feel an absolute sense of power and might get a little more arrogant than we'd like, missing the growth that comes from defeating a formidable enemy after a tough fight. The drama of the journey would be lost because Luffy inadvertently would show that there's no mystery in becoming the king of the pirates. You just need Gear 5th. But wait, we can't forget that the friendship and loyalty he's always been able to build with others would still happen. And Nami, seeing Luffy act without a drop of effort, would begin to understand that she still needs him to reach her own goals. It wouldn't be about strength or fight drama anymore, but about how genuine Luffy is and how he simply doesn't care about obstacles. The guy is free, and that draws everyone around him. Result? The Buggy arc ceases to be an epic battle and becomes a minor obstacle overcome in style. Nami, Zoro, Luffy, and even Buggy turn into a comedy of errors, each understanding their place in the journey. Luffy and Nami's friendship accelerates, and the pirate accepts that despite her selfish intentions, Luffy is a captain she can't help but follow. The big question is, what does this do to Luffy? With Gear 5th being so overwhelmingly powerful from the start, he wouldn't have the chance to learn some of the lessons he gained along the way. In the Buggy arc, Luffy has to learn to handle his role as captain, even without being so strong at first, and that helps him mature and understand the true responsibility of being a leader. If he already had Gear 5th, he wouldn't have to learn these lessons so early. The pressure of having that kind of power could make him act more impulsively in his decisions, with maybe a bit less reflection on the consequences. Maturity? That might come later, when he faces enemies that force him to deal with the responsibilities of being so powerful. But in the Buggy arc, that lesson would be skipped, and Luffy would move forward with much more immediate confidence. Thus, the Buggy arc would turn into an ultra-quick introduction to Luffy's journey. What was once a tense moment of overcoming challenges and learning what it means to be a leader and a friend would become almost obstacle-free. But the most important part, the story of friendship and camaraderie between Luffy and Nami would still have a deep impact, even if it happened much faster. Luffy's leadership dynamic, without the initial struggles, would be interesting, to say the least. Now, who do you think would be the first real challenge to make Luffy break a sweat? Could Gear 5th handle everyone? Or would even Luffy himself get lost in his own power? Logtown is the moment when Luffy is about to become a true legend. He arrives in the city where Gold D. Roger was executed, facing enormous challenges, especially with Smoker, the man with the Moku Moku no Mi, Smoke Smoke Fruit, capable of fighting anyone using his ability to create and control smoke. The city is tense, with the threat of execution and the dangers of clashing with high-ranking world government figures. In the original anime, Luffy escapes death thanks to a combination of luck, help from his friends, and Dragon's intervention, who saves him from execution. Now, imagine the same scenario, but with Luffy's Gear 5th of power that can reshape reality around him, allowing him to stretch, distort, and even control how the environment reacts. Smoker, one of the first antagonists to show real strength against Luffy, wouldn't stand a chance. Even with his ability to turn his body into smoke and attack from a distance, Luffy could easily manipulate the space around him with Gear 5th. He could create rubber-like forms to distort Smoker's smoke, almost as if he's playing with it, making all of Smoker's attacks useless. When Smoker tries to capture him with his smoke staff, Luffy could dematerialize the weapon or stretch his body to block any movement. The fight would be a joke for Luffy, as he could manipulate reality so much that even Smoker's smoke would turn into a rubber toy. Despite Smoker's strength, he'd likely be overwhelmed by Luffy's immense power, who could even turn the ground into rubber to destabilize him. Since Smoker relies on ranged attacks and controlling the environment, he wouldn't have time to react before being defeated. In the original, the execution scene is dramatic, with Luffy barely escaping. With Gear 5th, Luffy would be completely in control. The world government's execution plan would turn into a comedy show. Instead of being stuck on the platform, Luffy could do something ridiculous, like stretching to the sky and escaping with absurd elasticity. He could turn the entire execution into a joke. He wouldn't even need Dragon's help. Luffy's reality warping ability would make the event more relaxed and humorous than a real moment of danger. Impact on the Logtown arc with Gear 5th. Luffy would overcome the city's challenges effortlessly, radically changing the episode's dynamic. The tension of escaping execution and Dragon's intervention would be less significant, and Luffy wouldn't undergo much growth in this arc. Instead of a moment of imminent danger and emotional evolution, it would become a display of absolute power. This could make the story less dramatic, but at the same time lighter and funnier, showing Luffy already ready to become a legend without major sacrifices. Arlong Park arc is one of the most emotional moments in One Piece. Luffy's fight against Arlong and the rescue of Kokoyashi Village are crucial for Nami's story and her friendship with Luffy. When Nami suffers at Arlong's hands, the pain is visceral, and Luffy's battle against the Sea Tyrant is full of tension. But if Luffy had Gear 5th from the start, this fight would be completely different. Arlong, the fearsome fishman, is known for his brutal strength and his ability to control the ocean, terrorizing people with his tyranny. However, with Luffy having Gear 5th, he could defeat Arlong with absolute ease. Luffy's rubber body, stretching infinitely, distorting reality, and manipulating force around him would make Arlong nothing more than a joke. The fight, which originally led to Luffy's growth, as he had to overcome a formidable enemy and help Nami face her trauma, would turn into a display of colossal power. Luffy could easily break Arlong's control over the village, turning his weapons into toys and reshaping the battlefield to his advantage. He could even manipulate the sea to remove resistance, leaving Arlong completely powerless. There would be no need for the drama of Nami's struggles. Luffy would just land a quick blow. Arlong, your time's up, and zap, he's defeated. What makes the Arlong Park arc so emotionally strong is Nami confronting her own fate, the pain she endured under Arlong and her eventual liberation. The idea that Nami finally accepts Luffy as a friend after all her suffering is key to the story. But if Luffy had Gear 5th from the start, the fight against Arlong would be a simple exercise in destruction. Unfortunately, this would reduce the emotional impact of the story. The battle against Arlong wouldn't carry the same weight because the challenge of saving the village and facing a powerful enemy would be softened. Nami's struggle would be less relevant, as Luffy wouldn't need major effort or sacrifice to save the island. Her relationship with Luffy could still be important, but the emotional weight of her overcoming Arlong would be diminished, making her decision to join Luffy more of an immediate acceptance than an emotional journey. With Luffy's Gear 5th, the Arlong Park arc would stop being an epic, emotional journey of overcoming obstacles and become more of a showcase of how Luffy can defeat any enemy. While Nami's story would still be important for the crew's development, the dramatic weight of fighting Arlong would be completely reduced. Luffy's victory would be quick, and Nami's liberation, originally marked by pain and resistance, would turn into a more rational, straightforward decision to ally with him. If Luffy had Gear 5th from the beginning, both the Logtown and Arlong Park arcs would move faster, with less focus on personal challenges and more on a display of strength. While this would make the story more dynamic and fast-paced, it would lose some of the crucial moments that help Luffy and his crew grow and form emotional bonds. In the end, Luffy could defeat any enemy, but the emotional journey of his friends and his own personal growth would be replaced by a much more immediate, challenge-free path. This could affect the series' depth, but it would also make the journey lighter and more relaxed, with a hero who's incredibly powerful from the very start. Enies Lobby is the turning point for the Straw Hat crew. Here, Luffy and his team face the CP9, and specifically Rob Lucci, one of the most powerful villains in the series up to that point. It's an epic battle full of highs and lows, where the loyalty and sacrifice of every crew member are highlighted. But what if Luffy already had Gear 5th here? In the original anime, the fight against Rob Lucci is one of Luffy's most epic moments. He pushes himself to the limit, and what makes the battle so impactful is the sacrifice he makes just to keep fighting. Luffy takes every hit and still manages to get back up and win, because he's not only fighting for his own life, but for his friends' lives as well. Now, imagine that same fight with Gear 5th. Luffy already has colossal destructive power, capable of reshaping reality around him. Rob Lucci, who was already a massive threat with his super strength and agility, wouldn't stand a chance against Luffy, who could simply manipulate the space and time around him. In the blink of an eye, Lucci would be defeated, without Luffy having to endure even half the pain he went through in the original fight. The confrontation that, in the anime, is a test of endurance and Luffy's unbreakable determination would instead become a mere showcase of a nearly invincible Luffy. The battle would probably be very short, and the emotional impact would disappear completely. The main point of Enies Lobby isn't just the fight against CP9, it's also Luffy's willingness to sacrifice himself to save his crew and the value he places on friendship. When Luffy says, "I'll do anything to save my friends," it's that willingness to give everything that makes him a true leader. With Gear 5th, he wouldn't need to sacrifice energy or face struggles to save Robin or confront challenges. He would simply win with ease. Luffy's emotional development as a leader would be weakened because he wouldn't have to go through tough trials. Instead of being a hero who grows in the face of a great challenge, he would become an almost invincible figure, and the other crew members would have fewer opportunities to see Luffy struggle and learn from him. Marineford arc is one of the most significant arcs in One Piece. Luffy goes to war against the Marines, facing the admirals, Whitebeard, and other major pirates in a desperate attempt to save his brother Ace. During the war, Luffy engages in intense battles against powerful enemies. But with Gear 5th, all that drama would be completely altered. One of the biggest confrontations in the Marineford War is Luffy's fight against Akainu, the Marine Admiral, who kills Ace and nearly destroys Luffy. This battle is filled with doubt and uncertainty, as Luffy is exhausted and powerless against such an overwhelmingly strong opponent. In the original anime, Luffy survives only thanks to Sabo's sacrifice and the intervention of others like Marco and Whitebeard's pirates. But with Gear 5th, Luffy would face Akainu with absurd ease. Akainu, with his magma powers, would be just another obstacle for Luffy, who could manipulate the environment around him to avoid any attacks. The fight would lose all tension and gravity, since Luffy, with his nearly unlimited power, could easily dodge or even destroy Akainu's attacks. Instead of a desperate moment where Luffy has to give everything, he could simply dematerialize Akainu's magma and defeat him with a single strike. The biggest turning point in Marineford is Ace's death, a tragic and devastating event that shocked One Piece fans at the time. Ace's death is what truly pushes Luffy to grow and understand the value of life and friendship. Ace dies protecting Luffy, and the tragedy teaches us about sacrifice and the impact of war. Luffy, losing his brother, changes as a character, and chooses a new path. But if Luffy had Gear 5th, Ace wouldn't die. Luffy could have saved Ace easily, defeating all enemies around him and stopping Akainu from killing his brother. This would completely change the emotional dynamic of the arc. Ace would survive, but the war would lose its weight. The battles between pirates and marines would turn into a massive display of power, with Luffy basically invincible and without the tragedy that defines the protagonist's future. With Luffy having Gear 5th, the Marineford arc would stop being a heavy war filled with sacrifice and suffering. It would become a straightforward clash of powerful forces, with Luffy using his absurd powers defeating any enemy who tried to stop him from saving Ace. The gravity of the war would disappear. The Marines would be powerless. Whitebeard could fight, but Luffy would be unbeatable, and the tension of the war would vanish completely. Ace's death, a tragedy that shapes Luffy and makes him more mature, would never happen. The emotional impact of the war and Luffy's transformation after losing Ace would be completely altered. The Dressrosa and Whole Cake Island arcs are also crucial and intense moments in Luffy's journey, with epic battles, unexpected alliances, and major emotional challenges. If Luffy had Gear 5th during these arcs, the story's dynamic would change drastically. Luffy, with nearly unlimited powers, wouldn't need to face the struggles that, in the original anime, helped him mature as a leader and friend. Dressrosa is one of the most complex and exciting arcs in One Piece, with Luffy facing the villain Don Quixote do Flamingo, the feared ruler of the island. In this arc, Luffy and his friends deal with a series of challenges, including the Colosseums, the people's wishes, and the power struggles between nobles and pirates. Not to mention the drama involving the Toy Revolution and the mysteries surrounding Pika, Diamante, and the other members of the Don Quixote family. With Gear 5th, Luffy would have an overwhelming advantage against Doflamingo. His power in this form would be more than enough to neutralize any of Doflamingo's attacks, from his string manipulation to his ability to control shadows. Instead of fighting for the pride of defeating someone so intelligent and skilled, Luffy could simply turn the entire arena into rubber, trap Doflamingo in a force field shaped by his elasticity, and nullify all of Doflamingo's attacks with a flick of his hand. The battle would essentially become meaningless. Instead of a tense fight where Luffy has to control his emotions and use his abilities strategically, he could simply distort reality to make Doflamingo irrelevant as a threat. For Luffy, it would be a quick, effortless victory without really testing his strength or endurance. Emotional impact on the arc, without struggle, without growth. If Luffy defeated Doflamingo effortlessly, he would lose one of the key opportunities for emotional development. During the arc, Luffy learns to fight for justice and the freedom of the oppressed, and his victory demonstrates his growth as a leader and a hero. He not only defeats a formidable villain, but also liberates an entire people. With Gear 5th, the fight would lose any sense of struggle, and the tension of the arc would be completely obliterated. The sacrifices of other characters like Law and the gladiators of the Colosseum would also lose their impact, since Luffy, with his extreme power, wouldn't need to face any of these challenges. The arc, full of moments of strategy and overcoming obstacles, would become just a series of scenes where Luffy shows off his superiority. This would weaken the importance of the other crew members and even diminish the drama of the Toy Soldier Revolution, which would lose some of its weight since Luffy could solve everything effortlessly with his absurd power. Whole Cake Island presents an even more intense emotional battle, with Luffy facing one of the world's greatest powers, Big Mom. She is not only one of the 4 emperors, but also a ruthless enemy capable of manipulating living souls and protecting herself with extraordinary devil fruit powers. For Luffy and his friends, the battle is a life-or-death struggle as they try to save Sanji from an arranged marriage while also fighting Big Mom's tyranny. With Gear 5th, Big Mom wouldn't stand a chance against Luffy. Even with her soul-controlling abilities and powerful weapons, she would be completely nullified by Luffy's ability to reshape reality around him. The battlefield, with the entire island being warped by Luffy, would become almost unrecognizable. Big Mom, one of the most feared pirates in the world, simply couldn't compete with him. As she tries to summon an army of souls or use her control powers, Luffy could create rubber barriers or even turn the souls into fuel to keep fighting. The fight would turn into a showcase of Luffy manipulating everything around him like a playground game. All the complexity of the arc political alliances, the drama of Sanji's marriage, and even the tense escape from Whole Cake Island would disappear as Luffy would resolve everything with absolute ease. If Luffy had Gear 5th, the Whole Cake Island arc would stop being an emotional and strategic battle against an immensely powerful enemy and would become a series of quick victories. Big Mom, who in the original anime is a colossal threat, would become just another easy obstacle for Luffy. Sanji's desperation and the struggle to save him would lose their weight as Luffy could escape Big Mom's grasp and leave the island almost effortlessly. The idea of strategy and sacrifice from Luffy's crew would also lose significance. Characters like Sanji, facing major emotional dilemmas about his role in the marriage and family, would see their problems solved easily. Luffy could even change the whole dynamic of the arc, saving Sanji and defeating Big Mom before even entering a proper fight with her. The escape from Whole Cake Island would also become a simple getaway, with no need for complex planning or strategic routes. Wano Arc is one of the most epic and complex arcs in One Piece, full of monstrous battles, political twists, and intense internal conflicts. With Gear 5th, Luffy facing Kaido and the Four Emperors Alliance would have been radically different. But would the emotional intensity of her sacrifices and character growth still be present? Let's see how things would have unfolded if Luffy had been practically invincible from the start. Luffy facing Kaido atop Onigashima is one of the most anticipated and dramatic moments of the series. Kaido, the strongest man in the world, is the main villain of the arc, and the battle with Luffy is a test of endurance, strategy, and even spirit. In the original anime, Luffy takes tremendous damage, is defeated multiple times, yet always rises again through sheer willpower and leadership. He is forced to use all his resources, abilities, and determination to challenge such a powerful enemy. Now, if Luffy had Gear 5th, the battle would be completely unbalanced. Kaido, with his ability to transform into an immortal dragon and his supernatural durability, would still be a formidable threat, but Luffy wouldn't struggle. He could create gigantic elastic forms to fight the dragon, reshape the environment around him to neutralize Kaido's attacks, and even manipulate the laws of physics to create holes in time and space, disorienting Kaido and rendering any of his attacks useless. The confrontation that in the anime is an epic battle of endurance and power would become more of a showcase fight, where Luffy would be essentially unstoppable. The only question would be how long it would take him to defeat Kaido with his unparalleled strength, since he could even reshape the entire island to create an arena where he controlled every variable. The major impact of this fight in the original anime is how much Luffy is physically tested. He gets defeated, takes punches from Kaido that leave him on the brink of death, yet he always comes back stronger, proving his ability to grow under pressure. If he had Gear 5, those moments of despair and recovery wouldn't exist. The fight would lose its emotional weight because Luffy wouldn't be struggling against his own limits or facing an enemy who pushes him to the edge of death. The scene where Luffy shouts to his friends and crew not to give up, even when he's at his limit, would lose its symbolic value. He wouldn't need to fight for personal growth anymore, as Gear 5 would grant him an almost instant, effortless victory. The other members of the Alliance who also suffer in battle, like Zoro, Kid, Law, and the Samurai, would lose the weight of unity and overcoming obstacles, since Luffy would be setting the pace of the fight with no effort at all. Part of Wano Arc's charm is the sacrifice of the Wano Samurai fighting to free their land from Kaido's tyranny. Characters like Kinemon, Raizo, Kanjuro, and others are part of a narrative about fighting for freedom, where each of them has their own emotional and historical dilemmas. They aren't just trying to defeat Kaido, they're fighting to save their culture and their loved ones. With Luffy having Gear 5, this narrative of sacrifice and resilience would largely disappear. The magnitude of the battles and the sacrifices made by the samurai wouldn't carry the same weight, as Luffy, with his unmatched power, would likely have defeated Kaido long before the samurai even had a chance to show the true strength of their fight. Kinemon and the other warriors might still have moments of glory, but Luffy would be the key player and the solution to all problems. The dramatic heart of Wano is that the island's people unite, overcoming all adversity, with Luffy becoming the symbol of that revolution. However, with Gear 5, the revolution wouldn't have the same sense of urgency or unity for a common cause. Luffy could simply defeat Kaido without even needing the samurai's help, which would diminish the importance of the character's unity and the real stakes of fighting for Wano's future. Luffy wouldn't just face Kaido, he'd also face Big Mom, one of the four emperors who joins forces with Kaido to dominate the world. Big Mom, with her devastating power and political schemes, represents an even greater threat on the island. But if Luffy had Gear 5, this alliance would become little more than a secondary threat. Just like with Kaido, Luffy could erase Big Mom, ignoring any attempt she makes to use her soul-manipulating abilities or control powers. She would just be another obstacle that Luffy could obliterate with a single blow. The battles involving Luffy and his crew against Kaido and Big Mom's subordinates, like Queen, King, and Prometheus, would lose all tension, as Luffy would have the ability to defeat any of them effortlessly. The Wano arc is undoubtedly one of the Straw Hat Crew's greatest tests, where their unity is put to the ultimate test. If Luffy had Gear 5, he wouldn't need the emotional and physical struggles that allow him to unlock his true strength. He would destroy the villains with ease, and the battle would turn into a display of unlimited power. The emotional tension present in Luffy's interactions with Kaido, Big Mom, the samurai, and even with Zoro, Sanji, and Nami would be completely neutralized. What is a testament to determination and alliances forged in moments of sacrifice would become a mere spectacle with Luffy as the invincible hero. Characters who built their own strength throughout the arc wouldn't have the chance to shine, and Luffy would lose the opportunity to grow by facing complex, real challenges.